So this presentation has been put together on the back of the fact that we had a huge number of brand new careers leaders all arrive in the last couple of weeks, and I know from my own schools that about 3 or 4 of you are on this presentation today. But we also had a lot of experienced careers leaders who were all questioning all the raft of documents that we got at the end of last year. And not many of you have been able to sit there and actually go through them all and work out what the implications are. So as a result of that, I've put this presentation together. By the end of today, around 45 of you will have seen it, which means that there's a huge consistency across our region now. You have all had the same message. You all know where we're coming from. And it's almost, this is the state of play at the moment. And this is where we're going to be working forwards from going onwards. I'm an enterprise coordinator. I have been here for a year. Adam is going to take over a little bit of the presentation halfway through. And as I said to those that weren't there earlier on, Shirley's going to be monitoring the chat. So we've got 7 aims and objectives, which I'm going to go through. And at the end of each of these sections, and they do go one by one down the list, we'll have a short space where anything that's in the chat we can cover. If there isn't anything in the chat, fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the strategic expectations of you as careers leaders and how that fits into the curriculums and the schools that you all work and the colleges that you all work in. How you can start working more effectively with your enterprise advisor and potentially your careers link governor. And I'll explain the importance of the second part of that as we get to that part of the presentation. We're going to look at these 3 key national strategic documents that I referred to, how they're going to inform the careers agenda, both nationally and within our region. Adam is going to give you an update on the EM3 transition towards us becoming a careers hub this time next year. Then we'll have a break, and then after the break, we'll be looking at how you can start preparing for Ofsted. And I got off a meeting about 10 minutes ago of another careers lead who was expecting Ofsted to come in either side of half term. So that part of the presentation could be quite useful for those of you who are expecting the same sort of inspection. A bit of a CEIAG jargon buster for those of you are probably newer than the more experienced. But I do think it's a useful exercise in that we all use jargon and sometimes people can nod their heads and not have a clue what we're talking about. Well, we'll actually be looking at what our work is and how that fits into the jargon that we use. And the last part of the presentation, we'll be looking about how you can start or continue to embed careers across your curriculum. So those are the 7 objectives. So the first one is we're going to look at the role of a careers leader, and we're going to actually set the whole thing about what we do in context for the rest of the presentation. And I have met, as I say, in my cohort, I've got 7 brand new careers leads. And when I start talking to you all, or started talking to you, some of you were looking at it as the potential pot of gold, and the others were going, I don't think I've got enough arms for this role. I have no idea how I'm going to manage it. So between the truth and the reality, hopefully what we're going to do is we're going to clear the way a little bit so you can start identifying what the role actually is and how you can make that the best that you can using the people around you within your schools and colleges. There is a job description for a careers leader, and at the bottom it's the link. So when I send out the presentation, which I will do at the probably tomorrow, you'll be able to go onto these links. If you haven't got your microphone muted, could you mute it, because I'm getting feedback. So this job description for a careers leader says that what the role is all about planning and implementing a strategic development of careers programme for a school, meeting all 8 of the Gatsby benchmarks, so that we're preparing the young people to transition in education, training and in employment. Now, there's a lot of debate going on, and if any of you are members of the Facebook groups for careers leaders, there's a lot of debate going online at the moment about how long it should take you to be able to do this job, what sort of support you should have to be able to do this job, and how deep you can take it. Now, I can't tell you the answers to any of those three things because every school and every college is going to be completely different. But ultimately, the aim of your role is to fulfill those things. So what does it actually mean in terms of how you can operate the role? In effect, there are 4 key sections of 4 key tasks that you will be managing or leading on. So you'll be looking at being the leader for careers within your school or college. You'll be managing the programme, managing the development and the strategic side. You'll be coordinating all of the different people that you need to help you put that into place. And obviously there will be a large amount of external networking to get people to come in and help you support by delivering in the classroom with employers, training providers, colleges, etc. So if those are the 4 main areas, what do the tasks break down into each of those 4 areas? So in terms of the leadership, you'd be looking to advise your SLT on the policy, strategy and resources. And best practice is where you actually have an annually renewable careers policy. Some of you share that with us, and those that don't, we're always really grateful to see that. Basically, leadership and management are the 2 areas that come under benchmark 1. And as a region, they are the 2 areas that we are, the one benchmark that we're really focusing on developing is benchmark 1, 5 and 6. So these 2 things fairly sit right underneath benchmark 1. So you'd be looking at reporting back on your development to senior leaders and governors. And that word governors is going to keep popping up. And I'll go through why as we get to that stage of the presentation. How you review and evaluate, so you're actually measuring impact and you're actually developing your programme based on the evaluation that you've done with your colleagues, with the young people, with parents, with employers. Again, another benchmark requirement. How you prepare and implement everything that you say in theory, but in practice. But to be able to do that, you've got to manage the whole programme. So how can you plan schemes of work and share it with your colleagues to make sure that what they're delivering is up to date and accurate? How you can brief and support teachers, whether you're able to have any inset provision, whether you're going to be able to share that on the school intranet. The actual managing of how you share the information that they need to take into the classroom is obviously a key part of your role. How you monitor the teaching and learning. So again, impact is another key word that I'm going to keep coming back with. So how can you monitor what you're doing is actually having the impact that you want it to have for your students? How you can support tutors by providing up-to-date labour market information, brackets LMI, how you can tell them what's going on nationally in regards strategic development of careers guidance and advice, how you can support teachers and how you can actually pull all that together and in partnership with a range of different people, including your careers advisor, put it all into practice. So there's a massive amount of coordination. You cannot do this job in isolation. How can you manage the provision of careers information? Well, I know that over the last 18 months, a lot of your role has been sending out information online. It might not have been on a face-to-face basis. There are careers fairs that are happening. I've got one in one of my schools happening tonight. For the first time, it's actually going to be on a face-to-face basis. So slowly, I know that a lot of you are starting to think about how can we put some face-to-face things into place. How can I liaise with my PSHE leader to make sure that my 15 minutes or my half an hour a week in tutorial time is alive and it's up to date and it's going to be really interesting for your students? How can you map what your subject colleagues are doing as part of their curriculum? We're going to come on to that right at the end of the presentation. How can you liaise with head of year, mentors, Senko, colleges, huge raft of different people, and how can you incorporate and refer to your careers advisor the students who need to be seen at the right time for them? And last of all, establishing and developing links with college providers, establishing links with employers, commissioning careers guidance services. A lot of you I know were thinking about what is the best use of our careers advisor resource at the end of last year, and at planning to make sure that going forward into this year that you're using them as effectively as you can. And then managing links with the LEP, that's us, and other external organisations. So when you look at all of those tasks, I'd be surprised if some of you haven't actually stood up and run away, because it looks really, really scary. But it's got to be something that you do as part of a team. And that is one of the biggest goals from this presentation, really, is to say it isn't just your responsibility to get all of this lot done. So, first task, I've just put a slide up on the screen, and all of these different job roles could be and will be, some of them, in place within your schools. Can you just have a quick count up of how many of those job roles that you recognise are taking place within your own school or college, and just add the number into the chat? Shirley, what sort of numbers are we getting coming into the chat?
So far, 5, 6 and 8.
Okay.
Yeah, between 5 and 8 seems to be. There's 1, 3.
Okay.
1, 2.
Who is brave enough to put down 8? Could they unmic themselves just for a minute?
Well, Beljinda's on my screen at the moment.
Beljinda, which one of the blocks didn't you have in? Because I know you're one of the big colleges, aren't you?
Yeah. So I didn't tick enterprise coordinator and librarian, really. Those are the two.
Because enterprise coordinator is Megan.
Oh, okay. I'm just thinking of someone in school. So
yes,
9 then.
No. Yeah.
So I've been cautious about the librarian stuff. I mean, we do liaise really, really closely with them. I mean, but in terms of kind of like, you know,
you've dropped off, Beljinda.
Electronic.
Okay.
So I was just being a bit cautious.
No, that's fine. One of the people who put down 3 or 4, would you like to just share who you had?
Linda Twitchett's one I can see, or Sonia Turpin.
Hi, it's Linda here. So we have a careers advisor, careers lead, enterprise advisor, and then obviously we have a deputy assistant head with responsibility for careers.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, Linda. I think there is no right or wrong answer to this. What I'm trying to show to you is that across your schools and colleges, you will have a lot of people who are helping you or could potentially help you that you might not be utilising at the moment. So where it's got classroom teacher with responsibility for careers, some schools will actually have in each year group one classroom teacher who will be making sure that for their subject, they're responsible for liaising with the careers leader to make sure that anything that they're delivering within the classroom, for example, any labour market information, anything to do with PSHE when it comes to business, or so anything at all that might be relevant, they are using that person as a middle role. So it's not always the careers leader's responsibility to running around the corridor handing pieces of paper out. Some schools have got student careers ambassadors. Some subject teachers have already got subject ambassadors. Now, how you can utilise that role is, it's not for me to tell you how to do your jobs, but I'm just saying that there is the capacity to try and help spread the load a little bit with people who are already doing this. The Careers Link Governor is one that, as I said, I'm going to come on to, but in our experience at the moment, probably only a third of all careers leaders know who their Careers Link Governor is, have any sort of information links with that person, and it's very, very unusual for them to meet. So I think that's a definite resource that, as part of going away from today, there will be a number of things that we recommend. One of them would be for you to make contact with your Careers Link Governor, because when it comes to your link with SLT, that is the natural link through, as well as if you aren't a member of the senior management team, alongside your link, but the Careers Link Governor is somebody else that you can utilise. Okay. So before we go on to the second part, was there any questions in the chat about how you can manage the role?
No questions, Jan.
Thank you, Shirley. So we're going now on to how can you create an effective relationship with your enterprise advisor? Adam, is it worth me handing it over to you at this stage?
Yeah, no problem at all. I can take everyone through. I believe if I'm moving from this point onwards, other than this slide, we've only got sort of 5 slides, and then we'll be on to the next section. So for those of you who don't know who I am, I work alongside Jan, Shirley and Megan, my colleagues on this call. I used to be a traditional enterprise coordinator working with some schools and colleges. So some of you on the call will know me from there. But in September last year, I took on the role of solely recruiting enterprise advisors and finding businesses to link with you as schools and colleges. So some of the lovely EAs that you're working with would have come through the program that I've been developing over the last year with other ways of recruiting. So yeah, there's been some great people coming through. But for those of you that are paired with an enterprise advisor, it's really important that you use them. So with this slide here, just explain that the way our network is run ultimately through the schools and colleges, we've got employers embedded within that, and enterprise advisors play a huge part in that. So they are strategic volunteers, and the next few slides will cover that. But as you can see, as we've got on this slide here, the employers can act as a direct link with the young people, and also bring in careers sort of program providers, some larger organisations that can support you. And this can all be run through enterprise advisors as long as you are utilising them in the right way. So next slide, Jan, please. So the school and college structure of how we suggest to bring out the best in your careers programme for the pupils that are in the middle of this diagram are really, as Jan said, utilise that Careers Link Governor, utilise the senior leadership team, yourselves as careers leaders there flagged in red. But most importantly, as coming round here, the enterprise advisor is that kind of link between yourself and Jan, Megan, Shirley, all the coordinators that we support you with. We feed that enterprise advisor in, and they are almost another sort of third party, a go-between between you and that coordinator. They're someone that you can ask the question kind of first and say, have you got someone to help me? How can you support with this? They've got that level of importance. And I know previously, having inducted some advisors, they haven't had that kind of quite level of contact with their careers leader they've been linked with. So just from our side now, we're just prompting and saying, treat them like a really close confidant and do ask them some questions because it will really help you out. There's a suggestion on this slide as well to undertake the careers leader training given by the Careers and Enterprise Company, which is really important, and that will cover some enterprise advisor work as well. So next slide, Jan. So the purpose of an enterprise advisor, as I already mentioned, the word strategy is really important, but they will be a local business person. We always pair people generally from, if not the town or village or school is set within, then a nearby one within commutable distance. And that we've motivated them to help you to understand the world of work. We appreciate that as careers leaders, you're awfully busy people with a lot of other job titles probably bounded about within your role as well. And you may not have worked in any other setting than education before. So the idea of plugging in an enterprise advisor is that within an industry, they're probably recruiting or recruit people on a regular basis that can give you an insight into the world of work, the local industries, etc. And they are there to work on a strategic basis. And on occasion, some of them do opt in to maybe get involved with a CV workshop, a mock interview event, for instance. I know Nicola Risman on the call, one of the careers leaders, she's luckily had her enterprise advisor help in the last year with a mock interview event, which is lovely to hear. But that is optional. So kind of lean on them for the strategic support, some advice, the questions, as I mentioned before. And it will help you work towards your school or college vision and goals. Their key focus will be, as Shirley, Jan, Megan, etc. on the call supporting you as well, is on Gatsby Benchmark 1, the planning element, Gatsby Benchmark 5, bringing in the employers, Gatsby Benchmark 6, at the same time looking for employers who could maybe get your students out and about or through virtual means. So as Jan moved on to the next slide, what we suggest is that with the strategic element, here are some tips that can really help you get to the nitty-gritty with them, and you'll mutually feel like you're getting benefit out of the relationship. So where possible, complete compass reports with your advisor. If you cannot achieve that for whatever reason, if you're doing it at an unsociable hour, then maybe share the PDF of that report with the advisor so they get to see your yes, no, maybe answers, and sort of plan in discussions if you haven't done it live with them as to how you can maybe close those gaps. Be open about your gaps in provision, as that point says there. So what year groups, subjects or cohorts, etc. need support. It's really important to be upfront and create those clear asks. There's nothing better than for a business person knowing what needs to be achieved rather than having to figure it out themselves, perhaps, because they're not an internal stakeholder for you. They're more on the outside looking in. Share your school and college development plan and work with them to bring careers into it. That's vitally important. That's obviously a quite high level place we want you to be at with your senior leadership team, to have careers embedded in the priorities of the school or college which you're working for. Sounds like a bit of a haven, really, doesn't it? Something that's quite hard to get to. I can imagine, having worked with some of you before, I know that that was kind of a few steps away in years gone by, but hopefully you can, using the enterprise advisor, build bridges with the SLT and get to the point where not only is the school looking at results, like attendance and stuff like this, but have careers, the benchmarked employer contact embedded within your development plan. And the final point on this slide, to involve the SLTs in the meeting to raise awareness and drive change. It's vitally important that that happens so that the advisor has a chance to sort of bring forward the change that they're there to do, basically. Something I want to point out at this stage before moving to the slide is that we ran a session last year on how to make the most out of your enterprise advisor. And I am running a session, let me just check my calendar, on Wednesday the 8th of December. It's going to be a similar time to this at 3:15. I'll be getting an invite to you all as careers leaders with a month before the event, because there's all sorts of events we've got running in between now and then, and I don't want it to get lost. So early November, you'll be back from half term and you'll have an invite from us to sort of get more information and more sort of granular tips below these ones. So Jan, do you want to move to the next slide? So this is the rounding up of my section. It's ultimately, we ask you to consider from this meeting really important things with your EA, almost in a mini checklist. What's the next thing you want to discuss with your EA? Go back on the slides when you have them after this session and have a think about those suggestions. How regularly do you meet with your EA outside of meetings with your coordinator? So Jan, Megan, Shirley, Victoria, and Anstey, if you're working with them. What my suggestion is, whenever I train an EA, is have your 6 weekly meeting with the EC, but also contact the careers leader and try and meet them separately so that you can bring forward some action points and get some things going. If your EA's not contacted you to get those meetings themselves, contact them, ask the question. When they've been trained, they've been told that's one of the things they should be looking at, so it won't be a surprise. And then finally, has your EA met your careers link governor? I've personally been in a physical school meeting before COVID where that's happened, and it was really good to see the bounding off of ideas and stuff, but it's not happening enough. So if you can get them in a meeting, whether it's a 6-weekly one or one of those separate ones, please make that introduction and it will bring forward some positive change and impact. So yeah, that's everything from my section. So as Jan moves to the next slide, I'm sure we'll invite anyone to ask any questions. I've had the chat up and there's nothing in there, but if anyone wants to unmute and ask me a question at this point, more than happy to cover it.
Okay, I think there's only one thing that I would like to add to that is we have lost some EAs in the last month purely because they weren't being utilised by their schools, which is the saddest thing of all, because every single EA is a volunteer and they are willing to commit so much time and X amount of their experience and their knowledge into this role, and to lose them because they didn't feel that they were being utilised is the saddest of all. So please don't, I mean, it's easier for you to ask the question of them and them to say, no, I haven't got the time, rather than not ask something of them. So yeah, as I say, I think that's no questions at all for you, Adam. No? Okay. Right. Okay, so we're rolling on to section 3. Now, this is the meaty bit, which is all the strategic documents. And for the experienced careers advisors, careers leads amongst you, you will know that between January and July, the last week of July, we had 3 major documents all land on our desks, which will form and almost design where we've got to go to in the next couple of years. And so I'm going to go into a little detail with each of them. If arising from this you want extra information about any of them, then please contact either me or your enterprise coordinator afterwards. So what I'm going to look at very briefly is Gatsby Benchmarks, because I do know that there are a few of you who are relatively new to the role. The Skills for Jobs white paper, which came out in February, the Cdi Framework, which came out in April, and the Career Strategy, which came out the 2nd week before we ended up at the end of term. But before I do that, I think it's really important that we put into context where we are and how we've got to where we are, because it wasn't always like it is now. I've been a careers advisor I'm a qualified careers advisor for over 25 years. And when I started out, we were in the days of the glory days when every single local authority paid for careers advisors to go into schools, and I could be in schools 5 days a week. And the money was given to the local authority to pay for us to go in and do that. In 2011, the statutory duty was taken to schools and colleges to deliver the impartial careers guidance for themselves. And in 2012, careers education became the responsibility of schools and colleges. So the local authority responsibility was withdrawn, and it was taken on board by the schools and colleges. In 2012, the National Careers Service, which is now known as the NCS, was launched, and that became almost the adult part of the careers programme. And at that stage, they were 2 very distinct services. There was definitely NCS dealt with adults, careers service, and in some countries, some parts of the country, they were still being called the connection service, were very much for young people. Now, in 2013, the CDI had a little bit of a mini tantrum, and they decided that young people were not being prepared properly for what we now know as STEM subject employment opportunities. So the government asked for the Gatsby benchmarks to be designed, and I'm going to go into them in a little bit. I'm going to look at the outcome of the Gatsby benchmarks and why we've got to where we are in a short while. But the Gatsby benchmarks became almost the quality standard, and that has really had a huge impact on the level of quality within schools and colleges. And I'll show you a slide about that in a minute. But on the back of Gatsby, the CEC was launched, which is where we are now co-funded. So all your enterprise coordinators, we're part funded by the National Careers and Enterprise Company and the LEP that we are working for, which is EM3. And in the early days, the CEC were given lots of money to do lots of research, and the research formulated where we are now in terms of the Enterprise Advisor Network being formed. So that happened in 2016, about 2015 for a lot of places in the country, but in EM3, our region, the Enterprise Advisor Network was launched in 2016. In 2017, the Enterprise Apprenticeship Levy was launched, and the first careers strategy was launched. 2018, the first careers development framework was launched, and then we carried on happily in our little jolly way until January, when the new skills white paper was revised and launched, and then followed on, as I said earlier, by the Cdi Framework and the career strategy, all in the same year. So we went umpteen years with very few, and then all in 6 months, we got 3 major documents all coming in at the same time. So for those of you who are new, you probably will have been aware of the Gatsby benchmarks. I like to think of them as the strategic benchmarks, so that they measure what strategically is going on in each of your schools. They don't particularly look at the impact on the individual student. There is another tool, which I'm going to show you in a minute, which does that better. But what Gatsby does is it looks at all aspects of the strategic development within a school, all the plans, the outcomes to a certain extent of what's going on. So for enterprise advisors, it is a really useful exercise, as Adam said. If they can sit next to you when you're undertaking your next Compass report, which produces Gatsby benchmarks, if they can sit next to you when you do that, it's really useful for them. They're very good at being a critical friend. And I know of some schools where the careers governor also joins that meeting as well. From my point of view as an enterprise coordinator, I really get a lot out of sitting next to a school when they do it as well. And it is perfectly plausible that you can do a Compass report online with all of these people coming into the call, as well as a physical on-site meeting. But the benefit for everybody around the room, when you do the Compass in a meeting approach rather than as an individual, is really massive. So I'm not going to go over any more about Gatsby, because actually when it comes to your individual conversations with your EC, you should all be looking at your own improvement plans around how you're going to improve the specific benchmarks that you need to focus on. But for our region, as Adam and I have already said before, we tend to focus on 1, 5 and 6. And 1 is almost the machine that drives everything forward. So going back to these other papers that all arrived in the last 6 months. So we've got the Skills for Jobs white paper, which is that one. We've got the Cdi Framework, which is that one. And we've got the Careers Guidance Strategy, or the strategy as it's been called, otherwise known as that snappy title, the Careers Guidance and Access for Education and Training Providers. Much easier to use the strategy. So let's go through them one by one. So what did the Skills White Paper say? The first thing that it said was that schools should provide independent careers advice and guidance from year 7. It should update its statute. It said that the new statutory guidance was going to be relaunched. Now, the previous statutory guidance run out this time last year in October. So actually, between October and July last year, there was no statutory guidance that was in place because we were waiting and waiting and waiting for it to be relaunched. What it also said was that it was going to support and strengthen the Baker Clause. Now, the Baker Clause, for those of you who don't know, is where there is a commitment that every single school and college should give impartial and information on all of the different opportunities for young people to do at the end of year 11 and year 13. So information on apprenticeships, colleges, traineeships, and obviously all of the different sixth form opportunities that they can take on board. So in certain parts of the country, which doesn't cover, ironically, EM3, there are a lot of schools where, because of their location, the only transition really is for the student to stay on in the sixth form. So in terms of allowing the young people to be really aware of their opportunities, it is so limited, and it's so easy for those particular schools not to comply with the Baker Clause. I have to say, in our region, that is less the case, but there are still some schools who I'm working with who would say to me, I don't actually see any point in giving students information about apprenticeships because 99.9% of them are all going to the variety of colleges around us. So the Baker Clause is there to help us make sure that students are getting information on all their options. Further commitment was the rollout of the Careers Hub. Adam's going to talk about Careers Hubs after the break, just before the break. A huge amount of investment has been put in place for careers leaders. There was funding for 750 places on careers leader training up to level 6. As far as I'm aware, some of those opportunities are still available because they do them in 2 tranches of application. So you can apply now to start fairly quickly, but you can also apply now to start at Christmas, after Christmas. So it is possible to do the careers leader training at different parts of the year. It's not all a September enrolment. And then there was a commitment to revamp the National Careers Service website, which you might question, why have I put that up there? Well, the NCS website is one of the best resources for labour market information that there is. And for a while, it was very out of date, but it is now being updated regularly and there's new information going on a lot. So if you want information about a specific sector or a specific job role and you want to share it with your students, the NCS website is one of the first places that you can look. The last bits on the skills white paper said that it was going to involve Ofsted to look at a much more thematic review of careers guidance during inspections. It was going to align the CEC and the NCS so that we have a much more all-age guidance approach. So there isn't a cut-off point between the under 18s and the over 18s. And as I say, the last thing was to put this huge amount of investment into teacher training and professional development. Okay, so that was the first. So that came out in February. Then in April, the revised CDI framework came out. And if I said to you that Gatsby looks at the strategic or much more from an organisational point of view, what the CDI framework does is it looks at it in terms of what is the impact on your careers programme on your individual students. So it's much more student-centred than Gatsby is. There are 6 learning areas to the CDI framework. There is a massive amount of information on the website, which I've put the link on, including audit tools, which are brand new. There's tracking tools, there's posters, there's leaflets, there's handbooks. But going back to the 6 learning areas, the first one is Grow Through Life, and it's making sure that your programs are giving your students the ability to learn and reflect on their experiences so that their next steps are based on them evaluating what they've done so far. If you look at the evaluation so that you know what your skills are going to be, then you've got to be able to be given the tools to explore what your possibilities are so that you are researching all of the different things available to you. So going back to the principles of the Baker Clause. The biggest thing, again, if you think back to the linkage between CEC and the NCS being a lifelong careers programme support in place, managing your career is a lifelong skill, and the hope is that if students are given the tools to do that, they will be able to manage their career all the way through from sort of year 11 all the way till the moment that they choose to retire, so that they can learn and move on, and they develop resilience, and they understand how to sometimes move sideways as well as move upwards in their career choices. So by managing their career, they can then create the opportunities to enable them to be positive and build relationships. So if in a basic world, if you think about the opportunities that you can get from LinkedIn, part of LinkedIn is to find out what everybody else is doing, but also to sell your own abilities and your own skills, so you can be aware of new opportunities. So things like the advantages of social media would be something that would be covered within Create Opportunities. Now, the last two learning areas are brand new from the previous framework, and they are there as a result of COVID, because obviously the way that we all work now is completely different. So how can you balance life and work? How can you look after your well-being, your own mental health? How can you make sure that you are having an impact with your community? How you can continue to have strong relationships with your family? And then seeing the big picture is very much about what is happening on your doorstep and how that can be reflected on an international, a local, regional, national levels, so that you're much more aware of the impact of the economy on how you might work and what opportunities are going to be available to. So if you look at the COVID situation, the impact that COVID has had on the hospitality sector, the impact that COVID has had on IT and caring and social and medical roles. So what each of those learning areas is looking at is giving the individual student or young person the ability to manage their own careers. So going back to what I've just said, on the CDI development framework page, there are some very, very good and very new audit tools which map all of those different things across each key stage, across each subject area. And if you're looking at developing those, have a word with your enterprise coordinator and they would certainly be able to help you. And the last document is the career strategy. So what that did was it brought together all of the careers guidance, and guidance being the strategic operation, not careers guidance, documents into one from schools and colleges. They used to be two separate, but now they are one. The expectation of the reduction in age, which was in the white paper, to bring careers guidance and careers education down to year 7 didn't happen. It's been postponed until September 2022. But what we would be doing is really encouraging you, if you're looking at creating and putting into place careers, your programs, and you have year 7s in your school, then start looking at how you can bring year 7s into the program, because it's going to happen. You might as well start now rather than wait until next September. Huge prominence has been given to the Baker Clause. Some of you might have been contacted by your enterprise coordinators right at the beginning of term about where we can find your provider access policies on your websites. that was the first thing that we were asked to do by the CEC, who were asked by the DFE to actually go out and find out how visible those policies were. So that's almost like a little bit of a warning to us to say they're really going to play, that is really going to be important to them. So if you've got Ofsted coming, for goodness sake, make sure that that provider access policy is very visible. So emphasis on no favourable routes and the importance of all technical education, obviously to get ready for traineeships. Updated links to the importance of upskilling careers leaders. I think we've talked about that, but again, that was saying we really value this role. We recognise how important it is. So therefore, if you can get level 6 qualifications to prove this role, you know, we're putting a lot of money into that in terms of importance. Confirmation of the importance of improving Gatsby. Encouraging continuation of high quality and meaningful digital delivery, because there is a recognition that there have been some parts of a careers programme which have really taken off in the last 18 months purely because of digital, which it would be really sad if we lost. So things like Speakers for Schools, being able to do virtual work experience with organisations that are on the other side of the country, which normally would not have been something our students would have been able to access, to make sure that where appropriate, we blend the face-to-face with the digital. And the last of all, which is, I think, if I had a crystal ball, will be the one which I think we are going to continue to get little drips of information coming through, will be how we can start collating and collecting destinations data, because we all know that there has always been an issue with the benchmark where it says, are you getting destination data for up to 3 years? And in the previous one of these sessions, we had a bit of a discussion on how that's going to happen. Now, going forward with the Careers Hub model, which we're going to talk about in a minute, because we're going to be working, or schools and colleges are going to be working much more collaboratively within a Careers Hub model, we should be in a position where we can start to build some protocols between colleges and schools so that this information is much more two-way than it's been before. And we have already started to do a lot of work with local authorities to say, we know you've got this information, we know the colleges have got this information, the schools are being asked to prove that they've got this information, you know, several weeks after a student has started in at the end of year 11 in their college. We've got to look at ways of building these networks so that this information is much freer and it makes your lives much easier. I don't have the answers at the moment, and nor do any of us, but all I can say is it is something that we are really starting to look at, because you are going to be asked to show your compliance with the Baker Clause. We know that Ofsted are going to be looking at that. So some of this stuff is going to be driven by the strategic requirements within the strategy. Right. So I'm just going to go back. So before I go on to the next part, are there any questions about those 3 documents?
There's nothing in the chat, man, so unless
No.
anyone
Okay. One thing I forgot to say was that Cdi Framework, this is the first version, and this was intended for mainstream schools. They are developing one for SEND schools and colleges and employers and universities. So it will be a framework that, as things go on, and we were more or less promised in April that the next one will be out by Christmas. So please keep an eye on that page, because there is new things coming through. And if you are fortunate enough to be in a school where you've got 100%, or you are almost at that point within your benchmarks and you're looking at what can I do to get the next stage, I would start looking at how you can embed the framework, because if you match your benchmarks and the framework together and you can evidence both, you're getting really good evidence, I think it would be safe to say that you are starting to get something that is going to be really impactful for your students.
Jan, can I interrupt? There is a question from Victoria.
Hi, Jan. It was about the destinations data. So obviously we've always been told that the local authority can provide that data. What would you say to schools that either aren't sure who or how to approach the local authority or what department, or if they haven't got that data readily available, kind of how do schools get that data basically?
It is so difficult because in our region we have so many little councils that all hold on to it, and we're unusual in that way because also we cover 2 counties, whereas in a lot of careers hubs, which is what we're going to be, they won't have the number of local authorities that we've got or local councils that we've got. I almost need to, in a year's time, if you asked me that question, I would love to be able to say, this is what we did, because I think we're still at such an early stage at the moment. Each school has almost got to do its own bit of work with its own local council and identify when they send this information back to their councils, whose desk is it sitting on, because that council has to send it off to the DFE. There's also this thing about how can you build up the communication links with your local colleges. Now, there are some of you around in this meeting who will only have 2 or 3 main colleges that you might be sent, that your students might transition to. You'll also have some others where it could be 6 or 7, depending on how close to another county they are. So it is a nightmare. And I can't answer the question with one answer because it is almost bespoke for every single one of you that's in this meeting. But going forward, it has got to be resolved. And
so maybe, sorry to interrupt, maybe try and find the name of that person within your local authority and try and build a relationship with them so you've got that 2-way communication.
And do the same with the local colleges that you're sending the information to, because some of those are, I wouldn't say want to hide behind GDPR, but I'm working with one college who is very happy to share its information. And they're looking at how they can create protocols within the network of schools that feed into that one sixth form college, because that's what it is. So I think as we go forward with our hub model, I think it's going to be easier because people are going to start working more collaboratively together. But it is the most frustrating thing because I come from a county where that was never a problem. And I can see why it's a problem where I work now, but it wasn't where I live, if that makes any sense, because I don't fit, I don't live in Hampshire or Surrey, and where I live, it has never been a problem. But unfortunately, that's where we are here. So I can't answer the question in a lovely way, as frustrating as it might be, but other than to say that it is really important and it's something that we have got to sort out.
That did help though. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so just as a roundup for that little bit of that section, all of the documents and all of the things that I've talked about have started to have a massive impact on the improvement of quality of provision that our students are receiving, and you are all amazingly delivering in your own schools. One of the nicest things is that Gatsby Benchmarks have had a huge impact on education, employment and training rates in the most disadvantaged schools. So not only these don't concentrate so much on NEET, these concentrate on the actual increase into employment, education and training. And that shows that EAT has increased with every single benchmark. I'm not going to go through each of these because the statistics are there for you to see, but we are all having a massive impact, and I think that's quite reassuring to know. Okay, so from this little part, what would I strongly recommend that you do? The first thing is, if you haven't, and you will know whether you have or not. If you haven't been able to return your MOU, your Memorandum of Understanding, to your enterprise coordinator, please can you do it ASAP? Going forward, please continue to attend your half-termly meetings with your enterprise coordinator, your enterprise advisor, and where possible, your link governor. In your new MOU, you will see that there is an expectation that the Careers Link governor will attend one meeting over the year. So if you don't know who your governor is and you haven't got a good relationship with them yet, part of the MOU that you have signed up to says that that meeting will take place. So please, can you put it on your to-do list? And when you do have the information about your Careers Link governor, if we haven't already had it shared with us, if you could share it with your EC, that would be great, because we're putting into place CPD specifically for Careers Link governors as well, and we can't contact them and invite them in if we don't know who they are. Regularly undertake a compass evaluation. Again, your new MOU says it will be a termly requirement. And then this word impact, whatever impact measures you put in place, please really start thinking about what they will be and measure the impact on your students, your teachers, parents and employers. And don't be frightened of posting it on your websites, because if you can do both of those things, they are two massive requirements within two of the benchmarks. So we all know, each of your ECs will know of schools where different evaluation measures are being put into place, and we can give you advice and show you examples of good practice of the other schools that we work with if you want any support at all. Right, so before I move on to 4, which is where Adam's going to take over, is there any questions in the chat about any of that section, Shirley?
Not yet, Jan.
There, so you've got a break from me now then. So that's a huge relief. That means I can rest my voice for a minute and you don't have to listen to me babbling on for a while. So we're going to look at number 4, which is moving towards careers hubs. And this takes us up to the break. If you have any questions as we go through this, please ask. And if you don't want to ask in this session, and we know from the previous one, quite a lot of questions came at us the couple of days afterwards. So I'm going to hand it over to Adam. He's going to take us through this next bit, and then we'll have a short 5-minute break, and then I'll take back over again. Adam.
Thanks, Jan. We're about 5 minutes behind where we wanted to be, so I'll try and make this section quite snappy so that we can get off for a coffee or a tea, whatever you want to have, and come back. We want to finish on time today. I want you all to know that. We are aiming to transition to a careers hub in September 2022. What is a careers hub? I would urge you all to go away and look on the Careers and Enterprise Company website and various government websites to research. But to put it simply, it will be a grouping. Generally, they go up to kind of 40 schools in a hub. We may well need 2 if we meet our plans and get everyone up to the status that they need to be, all the different schools and colleges to be within a hub. We'd love to have 1 for Surrey, 1 for Hampshire, but it will be down to the kind of performance rates we can get to and the funding we can secure. A careers hub will be these groupings of schools that work towards best practice. We'll pump extra funding in through this careers hub, so we'll have extra staff that I'll cover later in this piece. And ultimately, you'll get more support across the benchmarks and from key organisations that are ready to work within these hubs. So yeah, exciting times. And Jan, if you move on to the next slide, perfect. So we will retain the 50% match funding from the LEP and the Department for Education through the Careers and Enterprise Company. We'll still retain the focus this year and going into a hub around the idea that we're doing everything for the pupils. And this will come through those 2 different dark coloured circles there. We will have the education engagement with yourselves, the schools and colleges, and myself and Tracy Tatum, my manager, will be running the employer engagement side of things and finding employers to plug into you with your programs. And then we will bring those light coloured circles there, so the local perspective from the LEP and from those organisations, and the education providers that we'll build associations with and will build into the hub as well. So it's a very similar setup in terms of the kind of input that we will provide, but it will just be delivered slightly differently. But this academic year will work towards that. So as this triangle shows here, what we're doing this year is structuring things slightly differently. So we are moving some schools into what we're calling careers hiatus, where I will show on the next slide, don't switch yet, Jan, but I'll explain that schools and colleges who are not meeting a certain set of criteria, we won't be working with you this year. If that's the status you sit within, you would have already been told that, so there shouldn't be any surprises for any of you. But the majority of schools in our kind of cohort this year are in network, and this slide describes what you get whether you're in or you're out. So in the network, which is typically working with us, having your half-termly meetings, so you get that one-to-one dedicated support from the coordinator. The schools and colleges are very much staying assigned in the same way, unless you were working with one of the coordinators named Mo, who has unfortunately now left us. And if you have not already been contacted by your alternative coordinator, if you're one of those schools, then we will be soon. We're just securing extra hours for some of our coordinators at the moment. You will still get business volunteer support. So through an enterprise advisor, you will be offered one. If you haven't got one already, we're searching for one for you if you're in the network. You will get remote project support as well. So if you flag projects that you want to work on with us, we'll help develop them for you, and you can plug into the projects we're already running as well. You will have access to workshops like this and training sessions. You'll get priority to events because you're in the network and you're communicating with us, and you will get updates regularly on the hub progress, and we expect more of that in 2022 because right now we're just in the kind of formulated process. And then the schools who end up in careers hiatus, if you flick back, Jan, just quickly, sorry, you'll get our newsletter, news bulletin, and be able to attend coffee break sessions. The schools in the network have exactly the same as those benefits, but they are the only ones that the hiatus schools will get. So yeah, Jan, next slide, sorry. So this is the breakdown of what constitutes to the different categories that we've got. So we are going to form the Careers Hub with schools that fit in the Trailblazers category. So if I start with that there on the left-hand side, you'll see it's completely green down all of the headings. So you'll be engaging with us as a careers leader. Link Governor will be plugged in. You'll have an EA who's engaged in using them. SLT will be involved in meetings and general careers planning. You'll be completing your termly compass evaluation, be attending the half-termly meetings with your enterprise coordinator. You will have taken the CEC Careers Leader training, which is the funded training that you have access to, and if you've not applied for it yet, your enterprise coordinator can help you do that. And then you will be meeting Gatsby Benchmark 1 at 100%. The reason that benchmark is picked out above any of the others is that's the planning foundation benchmark, that without that, you won't be able to underpin everything you need to kind of prepare to work with the organisations that will come with the Careers Hub. Below that, we will place some of you into a career leaders in careers status. So you'll see there meeting all bar 2 of the areas, which is the fact that you wouldn't have taken the careers leader training yet, and you may not be meeting benchmark 1 100%. So that's the kind of category that a lot of you will fall into, because those kind of areas, the bottom 2 there, can kind of be ones that catch you out, but you can kind of catch up with. Then you've got developing careers, where you just meet one basic requirement, where your careers leader's engaging with us to the point where we're having the half-termly meetings and moving things forward. Again, quite a popular category because Trailblazers requires so much. But what we will look to do through this year is move the developing careers up to leaders in careers, then to Trailblazers, and so on and so forth. We want every single school who's in the network to be a Trailblazer, so we can get you into the hub. So it's just raising standards, meeting these requirements. And if you've got some kind of any questions, start putting them in the chat. But these are things that your coordinator will be talking to you about a lot and have been covered in this training. So I don't think there should be any surprises as to what we're asking the standard to be met, if that makes sense. And then finally, you've got the careers hiatus on the right-hand side, where we feel those schools are not meeting all of those areas, so they don't qualify to be within us in the network. We need to concentrate our efforts on the schools and colleges that are ready to engage and meet these criteria. And as you've heard, we've lost Mo as a coordinator, so we're having to, reaffirm our commitment to the schools that are working with us, and due to capacity, make sure the numbers are correct. As the asterisk at the bottom says there, leaders in career may not meet quite all of the 5 criteria that are needed there, but those areas will be prioritised through the enterprise advisor and coordinator to bring you up to the trailblazer status as soon as possible. So next slide, Jan. This is my favourite slide of this piece because it's the most positive one. It's the value proposition. So what we plan to bring through the hub. So it'll be a community of best practice. So you'll be able to share with the schools that are also trailblazers in that hub, the areas of development that you've got and the things that you've done well. We will be able to recruit a careers hub lead, so they will be a sort of regional strategic support. As I've said, we hope to have that in Hampshire and one in Surrey as well, but we'll see what funding we can get and how we progress. We will have an operational hub lead who will lead more of the events and bring a bit more capacity to what we've got at the moment. We'll still retain the enterprise coordinator support, so that's an area that won't particularly change in a way because we'd still have Jan, Megan, Shirley, etc. And Megan and Nancy too as part of our network. We'd be able to recruit a project officer who would go even deeper and pick up on those projects you really want to work on and maybe come up with some ideas that we can put to key trailblazer schools in the hub. And we will, as I say, get additional funding to run certain projects and plug other things into the network, which will be really, really exciting. Next slide, Jan. So this is the final one before the break, and we take any questions, of course. The journey to becoming a careers hub will be formed by those trailblazers in careers, as we've said, and an employer advisory group, which myself and Tracy are chairing. So we are forming an early group of employers that are prepared to run programs with larger groups of schools than just being an EA and working with one school. So that employer advisory group will become something called a cornerstone employer group, and these cornerstone employers will be those larger organisations or maybe SMEs with that capacity to step up and help more than one school at a time. So the schools, the trailblazers in that hub can really take things on from them, learn from them, interact with them and get new contacts. So that's how we're kind of forming from an employer side and a school and college side in the middle in the hub in September 2022. So that's everything from me in terms of what was on the slides. I can see a question in the chat already, which is, can the careers lead also be the careers link governor? Is there any guidance on this? I don't know of any guidance. Jan, you've done a lot of work on the governor's side. Is that something that can be achieved?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the way that we've got some careers leads who have also got level 6 careers advisor, and we are looking at saying, okay, if you've got level 6 as a careers advisor, do you need to have careers lead management as well? Possibly not. So at the moment we're saying that's okay. I think if you are a careers link governor and you are a careers lead, then I think that would be absolutely fine, because you've still got the same opportunities to feed into SLT, and probably more so than you would if you were just, if you weren't the careers link governor. So does that answer that question?
Hopefully so. And yeah, we've had confirmation in the chat. One thing I would add to that is something that's really worthwhile is actually having a careers link governor that's from a really respectable or decent organisation in the local area that brings that almost outside perspective of the world of work into the governing body. That can be really useful to have a careers link governor in that aspect. So just consider that, as great as you could be as a careers link governor, just the outside influence that you could get from that could be even better. So yeah, it's just food for thought maybe for you all as you move forwards. We haven't had any other questions pop up in the chat, to be fair. So just another comment.
Hang on a minute. I'm just coming back a minute because I'm fed up of looking at a screen. I think going from what Adam's just said, if any of you've got any questions, because I recognise that this presentation is just bombarding you with information, and speaking to a couple of people who went on last week's, they all said to me that they needed the weekend to digest it, and then they messaged me on Monday when they'd taken it out and it come out the other end into questions. So if you need that amount of time, either come back to me or Adam or your own EC, and as and when you're ready, we'll be ready to take your questions. But I'm really conscious, as Adam said, of the time. So I don't know what the time is. What is the time? Right, so if you can all come back, if you want to go and put the kettle on and come back in 5 minutes, that would be great. Thank you very much for your tolerance and your patience, and we will get to the other side of this, I promise.
There is one brief question in the chat, Jan. We might as well pick it up before we forget it. It's from Augusta, and she's asked, would you support a proactive careers assistant undertake the level 6 training, or is that only available to a careers lead?
Careers lead, the training is able, sorry, I'll start again. I've got to get my teeth back in place. Anybody in a school can apply for careers leader training, providing they are going to be able to evidence the work as part of their role. And you can put forward as many people per school as you want, but they can only do the training once. So if they go forward for the unaccredited version and then they choose to accredit it afterwards, they can't under the fully funded bit. But every single person that completes, accredited or unaccredited, gets the £1,000 back into the school. Now, just before we go on to the main session, when it comes to if you feel that you would, even if it's not you, you would like somebody else in your school to go for the training, and that is one of the things that is stopping you from being in our Trailblazers group. As enterprise coordinators, we would rather know that you've got that planned than you not tell us, because you can, as I say, they have 2 intakes a year. So you might say, I've got a lot of new careers leads, and all of them have said, please don't bombard us with anything else. I mean, it's like information overload. The last thing we need is to take on careers leader training. And actually, for somebody new, it's probably you need to be in the role for at least 6 to 9 months before you do the training. But I know who those are and who intends to do it next September. So I've already made a note of that. So please don't let it stop you from putting anybody else forward, or even putting yourself forward later when you feel that you're going to have the time and the capacity. It is hard work. You have to do it in 2 terms, and some of the qualifications are up to level 7. So the qualification goes with you as individuals, not with the school. So if you were looking at it as something for portable purposes for your own career progression, incredibly useful to have, because if you think about how many people have already done the qualification, there is a large number of people. So if you were looking at moving to another school and you took that qualification with you, it's obviously going to be an advantage. Any other questions about careers leader training? They did do a national event about 2 weeks ago, and it was fully recorded, and I do have access to that recording if anybody wants it. Right, shall I continue with the presentation?
There's no more questions.
Okay, right, I am going to now I might have to start sharing again and find it. Right, I can only assume that you can see that now.
I can see a cup of tea.
Perfect. Yeah, so keep calm, drink tea and don't fall asleep. That's the mantra for the second half. Right, okay, so we're in there together, we're nearly there. Hold on tight and we'll get to the other side. So this is the part which looks at preparing for Ofsted, and it is a very quick go through. There is a very, very good CEC training for careers leaders on preparing for Ofsted, which a couple of the ECs have been on and they've said really good things about. So it does get booked out very quickly, but if you let them know that you're interested in it, as soon as we hear about it, we can propose it to you. So without teaching you to suck eggs, inspections evaluate intent, implementation and impact, and the careers part sits under the personal development of the 4 key judgment areas. And when making a judgment, an Ofsted inspection will examine a range of different things. They will look at the quality of your careers information and education advice and guidance provision, and they will do that by looking at what's in place on your website and what is in place in the classroom. In that particular training I've just alluded to, the person who runs the training is a careers specialist Ofsted inspector, and she admitted that prior to going into any school, the first thing she will do is look at a website. The more she can see on the website that proves impact, proves what you're doing and the outcomes and the benefits, and how regularly the information on your website is updated, the less likely they are to do a very digging deep depth approach when they're on site. So what they'll be looking at is how well what you are saying you do benefits your students, going back to impact. So if you've done any evaluation and you have and you can show that evaluation, then by all means put it on your website. Make sure that your provider access policy is very, very visible. They've got to be able to find it within 3 clicks. And then look at how you can evidence that you are fulfilling the Baker Clause compliance, and how can you use the data that you produce for your Baker Clause destination data. How can you show that on your website to make it imaginative and to show that young people are getting information on all of their options? We do have we have in our cohort some excellent examples of different websites which your EC can show you if you ask the question. So when it comes to what Ofsted are looking at as strategic and statutory responsibilities, these are the things that they say that they want to know about. They want to know that every school has got a careers leader. They want to look at the careers link governor and how visible they are. Although it isn't a statutory requirement that you have a careers link governor, it is very recommended. They would want to say, as I said just a minute ago, how you comply with Baker Clause. They would want to see your careers policy on the website in ways that make sense. You know, if you have just posted your policy word for word and it is a dry piece of paper, think about how you can make it alive. How can you prove to people who are going to visit your website that you are doing and you've got results from what you say that you're going to do? They would want evidence that you've got independent and impartial careers guidance. We are still finding schools and colleges in our cohort where young people are getting careers advice from people who are not qualified up to level 6. And we are about to do some research using our Trailblazer schools into how careers advisors and careers leaders can work more effectively together. We're going to trial it with our Trailblazers, and then we're going to roll that out after Christmas to our careers leaders schools. Providing careers education from year 7, I've already said that that was quite a big mistake. Apparently it was an oversight that it wasn't in the statutory in the strategic guidance, because it certainly was in the white paper. At the April launch of the Cdi Framework, we were told that Ofsted have expressed a big interest into the framework, and that they were going to be trained into how to look at the framework from this September now. So expect, as you go forward, you know, if you've got expecting an Ofsted inspection, maybe not straight away, but in the next year, expect them to be interested to see if you've done any mapping against the framework. They would want to see ongoing progression towards achieving the Gatsby benchmarks, and they can access your benchmarks, your compass scores, without you knowing. Let's put it out there that they have access to your benchmark scores. So again, they would be looking at that with your website before they make a decision on how deep a dive they were going to make when they're actually on site. They're going to be looking at how you are demonstrating your destination, not demonstrating, how you're posting your destination data, how you are sharing that with all of the different parts of your website. And as I say, the key word again is how can you evaluate and demonstrate that you are having an impact, or your program and how it's delivered is having an impact. So those are the different things that they would want to see from an Ofsted point of view. Right, before I move on to the next bit, is there any questions from Ofsted? I know that's a tiny, really scratching the surface.
No, there's nothing in the chat.
Thank you, Shirley. We're rolling. We're up to number 6 now. So, okay, lots of you will have heard different bits of jargon, and you might just have nodded your heads as if, yeah, I know exactly what the difference between careers education, careers information, careers advice, careers guidance, and what the heck, how can I prove impartiality in all of this? What I'm going to do now is a little bit of an exercise. So by the end, hopefully you will all understand the different parts of these different words, because they all have a different meaning, but they all mean the same thing. I'm going to give you a little case study. So there's a person called Chris, and he's currently in year 11, and he attended a talk by the fire service in school, and it inspired him to ask to do some work experience and some observations in his local fire station. And having done that, he was absolutely committed that that's what he wanted to be. I am going to be a firefighter. So he went along to his school careers library, where he met his careers leader, who gave him the information that he asked for about and he was given information about very specific websites that he could use to get more information about how to be a firefighter. He went home, he did a bit more research using that website information, and he learned that to enter firefighting, there is a minimum age requirement. There aren't particularly different specific entry requirements, but it is very competitive, and quite a lot of that role is dependent on you being able to prove that you're physically fit. So Chris, in his bedroom, decided that what he was going to do at the end of year 11, he was going to find building work to build up his physical fitness. And also, whilst he was getting physically fitter, he would also get closer to the minimum age restrictions, at which point he would be able to apply. Alongside that decision making in the classroom, in his PSHE lessons, he was taught how to complete an application form, which he thought was going to be great. So as and when the time came, he knew how he was going to fill in the form to be a firefighter. But underpinning all of this, Chris is quite academic, and his GCSEs were to the top level. And at a parents' evening, his parents found out what his academic ability was going to be like, and they came straight back home and said, forget anything else, we think that you should go to university. So Chris is now in year 11, coming towards the end of year 11, and he's got all of these things floating around in his little head, and he's getting a little bit confused. So I'm going to show you another slide now, and what I'd like you to do is each of these statements I'm going to read through, I would like you on a piece of paper to put down whether you think they are information, whether it is advice, whether it is careers education, or whether it is careers guidance. So the first one, during his work experience, he spoke to firefighters. He watched them practice and listened to their stories of how they entered the profession. So is that red, blue, green, or yellow? He visited the careers library for answers to his questions with his school careers leader. So which group does that come under? The careers leader gave him some website addresses and some leaflets about the fire service. Again, which one? Chris used this to find out about the entry process, recruitment requirements and qualifications needed. Again, which one is that? In PSHE, he practiced filling in his application forms and CV writing. He used all of the above to decide what his next steps would be. And then the last one says, Chris shared his ideas with his parents who were unhappy. They contacted the school to intervene to tell him about you, to ask the school to give him information about university choices. So there was a bit of a clue. So hopefully you've got one of those, or those statements next to each of those things. Okay. Unfortunately, because of the way that we're having to deliver this, I can't go around the room and ask you what you put, but this is what the answers actually are. So the fire service, the internet sites, that is information. You cannot guarantee that some of the stuff that he will have found will have been impartial. So it is information. The leaflets about the fire service are information. Again, you don't know how up to date the leaflets are unless you date stamp everything. You don't know who wrote them. You don't know how up to date it is. You don't know the quality and the accuracy. So that is information. The answers that he got to his questions when he came in and asked you about, or the careers leader about websites, generally is advice, because if you ask the question and you just give the information or the response to that question back, you're tending to give just advice, and just is the wrong word. You're just giving advice. The input from teachers, careers leads, parents and fire service employees, again, is all advice, because you can't completely guarantee that that is going to be impartial. Some of the advice that those people might have given back could have been weighted. So, for example, the fire service employees are probably going to say, actually, this is a really great job. We think this is perfect for you. The careers lead might go, well, actually, this is really good because I know what you're like, and you know, this is the sort of thing that you might be interested in. But they might not have given him any alternatives or any other options to consider. So the careers education bit were the recruitment and the application techniques that he got in PSHE, and the work experience and the job shadowing is either careers education and or advice, depending on, you know, whether it was part of the careers education program in that school to have work experience and job shadowing. What we haven't had so far, or what Chris hasn't had so far, is careers guidance. Because if he'd had careers guidance, he would have had a one-to-one session with his careers advisor, who should be qualified up to level 6, who is skilled to help him look at all of the options, make balanced decisions, consider all of the different entry routes that are available, short-term and long-term strategies. So yes, he came up with a strategy, which was, I'm going to leave school and I'm going to look at building work, probably an apprenticeship, make me feel physically fit, and then I'm going to apply. So, but a careers advisor is very skilled at being able to look at more in-depth strategies and more in-depth options where they all match out, so that they give the individual the chance to make their own mind up about what is the best option for them. Now, having said that, Chris still might come up with the same decisions. He might still choose to do exactly what he's decided to do prior to having input from a careers advisor. But at least having gone through the careers advisor process, he will have been given all of the information that he needs to make impartial and balanced information. So he would have had impartial information and advice. And he would also have been given up some backup plans as well. So when you hear the jargon, information and advice, it is because there is a process there. The information gives you the information that you need to ask for the advice and then ask for the guidance. Okay. That's a little bit of jargon, but I think it's helpful because it explains how in a school we're all giving young people careers in education, information and advice and guidance, and we all have a role to play in that, but we all have to make sure that what we're imparting to each of our students is accurate and up to date. And on that basis, I'm going to move into the next section unless there's any questions in the chat, because the next section looks at careers education.
Right, there are no questions.
Okay. So I'm just, before I do that, I said to you earlier that we're looking at how we can help you use and maximise your time with your careers advisor. So these are a few pointers that I would suggest you start thinking about in conversation with them. First of all, please make sure that they do have a minimum of level 6. If they're a bought-in service from an independent provider, such as Hampshire Futures, EBP South, they will be. If they are being paid for by yourselves, please make sure that they are, because I know of one organisation who thought that they had recruited somebody who was level 6 and they found out that they weren't. In addition to their one-to-one careers guidance, what other involvement are you able to ask your careers advisor to help you with? Do they do assemblies? Do they do presentations? Do they get involved in sector activities? Do they support business studies team by giving really up-to-date information on what a CV looks like, because they're completely different to what they were even 2 years ago? Could they get access to you for some application forms and help you at interview days? What percentage of their time covers careers interviews? Who creates the interview lists and how does that happen? Do they start at year 11 and work their way backwards so that by the end of the year they have seen everybody in year 11, then they go to year 10, then they go through to year 9? Or is there some ranking of looking at those young people who you know potentially going to need the most support, and they might see them more than once? They might see them once a term. They might see them in a group session. How are those lists being created? Do you get colleagues to help you? Do they provide you with people who they would recommend that the careers advisor saw, or is it literally an alphabetical list? If the careers advisor is employed via a private provider, do you have input into what their contract is going to look like? I supported quite a number of schools last July to get the best out of their private provider that they could, because it is very easy to get into a role where, oh, well, this is what we did last year, we're going to do exactly the same next year, and it's just the easiest way. But is it the most effective way, and is it best value for money? Because don't forget, you are the client when it comes to the private provider. And yes, there is a shortage of careers advisors, but if you are paying a provider to deliver you a careers advisor, then make sure it meets the requirements of your school, not of the private provider. And if the careers advisor is employed by your school, how can you ensure impartiality? Because there will be, if Ofsted come in, they're going to want to ask that. If you're going through the Quality and Careers Award, they will want to know how you can measure impartiality. Again, I have been a Quality and Careers assessor in the past. So if any of you are going through that and you want a bit of support, please ask your EC to ask me the question and I will feed back anything that I can. Right, that is the end of the jargon CEIAG bit. Is there anything there, Shirley?
Yes, there is. What if you can't find an advisor who can meet the very specific needs of your students?
Is that a SEND school or is that a mainstream school?
I believe it might be a SEND school. Yeah.
That is a massive bugbear of mine, because if you are recruiting from a private provider, they are the ones where I find it the most difficult to have that argument with the private provider. I'm just making assumptions that that is the case. If you really, when it comes to getting some support, if you want to contact me, I'm more than happy to give you some examples of what you can be asking for. I don't want to get into a political discussion on here, but it can be very tricky to work your way through that.
I know that with some SEND schools, that the feeling is that somebody in the school knows the students best. So perhaps it's right for them to undertake the training.
It can be, and yet you can do careers guidance training, but equally, I have supported 2 of my SEND schools to recontract with their private provider to get what they actually felt was the best. And it meant doing lots of group works rather than one-to-one individual sessions. And it meant looking at how we can link to get employers to come in and maybe give the students little projects so that they're getting the information in slightly a different way. It's so bespoke when you get to that. Contracting is obviously a much more bespoke process to go through, but anybody that wants any help, please just ask.
Victoria's put a message in, can we explain we may run a SEND benchmark 8 session? So there's obviously things that we're looking at regarding careers advisors and how we can support you. So look out for that. We'll let you know as soon as it's ready to roll.
Yeah, I've forgotten I'd committed to doing that, Victoria. Yeah, I've forgotten about that. I can remember that. Right. I'm very conscious of the time, and we're nearly there, and we will finish on time. This is a very, very quick rush through careers within the curriculum, which could be a session in its own right. I mean, to be quite honest, all of these could be, but you know, we're just trying to get everybody up to the same speed. So careers across the curriculum is very much giving your students the skills that we know employers are saying that they want. And I will argue that most of the skills that employers say that they want, students are getting as part of their curriculum subject teaching, but they just might not call it that. So things like resilience, teamwork, confidence, customer awareness, we all know that every single day our students are collecting those skills as they go lesson by lesson. The difficulty is helping them to identify that that's what those skills are called, so that when it comes to an interview or an application process, they can actually give an employer an example of when they were resilient, or an example of when they did some team working, when they did a project in the classroom, how that they can show confidence when they might have stood up at the front of a group of students and spoke. So part of this is saying to you, how can you spread that message to your colleagues that every single day in the classroom, they are teaching their students employability skills, but they might not call it that. And I think that is the big issue here. So what can you do to help that learning for your colleagues and for your students go ahead? There's a range of things that I put on here. Should you undertake an audit of what careers is input within the curriculum, for each subject area? If you wanted to, there are some very good audit tools on the CDI website, which we can signpost you to. I'm just going to give you, I am running out of time, but I just want to give you for example of the sort of time that might happen. So for example, in geography, quite often you will be looking at how different towns, cities and villages have built up where they are because of the geography around them. The most obvious one is the marine sector that has probably built up around, say, Portsmouth and the harbour around there. Now, part of natural geography is teaching students about that, but how can you make the connection between the sectors and the industry around that and how they formed, with making sure that the subject teachers who are delivering that as part of their GCSE subject, the information that they're using is up to date? How can you do that? You can't do that unless you know at what point in the curriculum, at what term, the students are being taught that, so that you can then come back to us or look or research yourself to make sure that you're informing your staff and your colleagues with information that is useful for them in the classroom, but is also up to date. So I've put what aspects of the national curriculum already include a CEIAG aspect, but it's not identified as that. I've worked in schools where I've done an audit where the students were being killed by CV lessons. English was doing a CV lesson, business studies was doing a CV lesson, PSHE was doing a CV lesson. They were all doing the same thing in the same year group in the same term. Nobody had talked to each other. They were all filling out different templates, none of which were particularly good, and the students were basically dying from CV lessons. So having some form of audit would be really helpful to stop that repetition happening, and making sure that when they do the CV, that the audit, that the template that they're using is really good and the information is as up to date as it possibly can be. You will only find that out by doing an audit, and actually the framework is one of the best ways of auditing that. So if you can use the audit tools for the framework, they will also help you be able to do that. So I've just said, are duplications across the curriculum death by CV? Where are your teachers getting their LMI from? How is it accurate? How can you guarantee that it's accurate and legitimate and it's actually up to date? Is the same recognition given to the acquisition of transferable employability skills as it is to academic success? I worked in one school which was very near to the Olympic Park in Stratford, and on a Wednesday afternoon the students were allowed to go back home and do their coursework and their homework. And actually all they did was they went straight on the opposite side of the railway station to this huge shopping centre that's on the other side of Stratford train station, and the teachers were going bonkers because they were saying they're all going to work when they should be doing their homework. So I did a lot of work with the staff there to say, actually, how can we value the skills that your students are getting on their Wednesday afternoon? So instead of saying it's a really negative thing, actually valuing what they're getting, because they were all getting money handling, they were all getting customer service skills, they were getting excellent timekeeping, team working. So what we did was we put some posters in every single classroom with a list of all of the different employability skills that a student could receive within an ordinary classroom lesson. And at the end of each lesson, the teacher would highlight a couple of them to say, you know, when you went off and did that research a minute ago, that's what it's called. It's not part of your GCSE coursework, but in employment terms, that is research, that is project work. So we're changing the vocabulary in the classroom. I'm going to gloss over the rest. Yeah, the only one I'm not going to gloss over is how can you share good practice within your own department and across your whole school? Because if one subject area is doing some amazing things, how can you make sure that starts to be replicated across the other subjects? Excellent case studies, teacher training days, all of those sorts of things. Have you got any access to time in those? Don't all start laughing, because I can hear you laughing from here, but it is possible. And you know, there is always the opportunity for us to come in and do some careers across the curriculum CPD with your colleagues. So bringing everything together, we're nearly there. I've got 5 minutes. So Okay, going forwards, and I know that some of this has already happened from the last training session because I've already been inundated with a lot of these from people who attended the last session. First thing, when you leave here, make contact with your enterprise advisor and your link governor and start putting in some planning meetings. If you haven't done that already, if you are new to the service, new to the role, then it's really good practice, and nearly every single EA is waiting for that call from their new careers leader. They all know that you're new if you are new. If you're experienced, how about looking at how you can make maximum access with your careers link governor? Again, if you haven't already, please return your MOU to us and start thinking about how you can really work in partnership with us as we work towards Careers Hub model. Use your Gatsby as the basis for improvement plan. Share any key dates that you've already got. 2 days ago, a survey went out from all of us to all of you, asking you to share with us your key sectors that you know your students are asking for and any key dates that you've got. The more information that we get back from you in that form, the easier it will be for us to start mapping and identifying employers and targeting which employers who really want to start working with you, where they are and how easy it will be for that to happen.
A small disclaimer on that, Jan, is that the survey went out to the leaders and the trailblazers initially, and the third tier that we've got may be included depending on capacity and how many organisations we get. So just to be clear, it's not gone to developing careers schools or careers hiatus. Just a little disclaimer.
Okay. Review your compliance to the Baker Clause. Look at everything that you're doing to make sure that you can show impact and that you're showing compliance. Consider the opportunities to you within the careers leader opportunities. Think about auditing what's going on in your curriculum. And then last of all, the employer engagement. How can you impact your classroom? How can you enhance your classroom delivery with the input from employers? And how can you maximise your enterprise advisor? And some of your teacher colleagues have already got those links. How can you make sure that you're bringing it all together? So go back to those very, very, very first slides 2 hours ago, where we looked at the 4 main skill areas, and most of the things that are on that piece of that slide there fall out of those very, very first 2 slides. I think if I press click, yes, you've come through it. We've got through to the other end.